Sarah Hayes shivered in the bitter February wind as the sound of her husband's laughter drifted through the saloon's swinging doors, mingling with the clink of poker chips that represented the last of their money. And now, apparently, their home. The year was 1875, and Terlingua, Texas was showing its cruel winter face, unusual for the typically warm border town nestled near the Rio Grande. You lost what? Sarah's voice barely rose above a whisper as her husband Thomas stumbled out of the Red Mountain Saloon, his eyes glazed from too much whiskey, and the hollow victory smile of a man who believed his luck would turn with just one more hand. It ain't permanent, Sarah. I'll win it back tomorrow. Thomas swayed on his feet, his once handsome face now slack with defeat poorly disguised as confidence. Sarah clutched her threadbare shawl tighter. At 25, she had already seen enough broken promises to last several lifetimes. 5 years of marriage to Thomas had taught her that tomorrow's luck never came, only tomorrow's excuses. Win it back. With what money, Thomas? That was everything we had. Her voice cracked as the reality settled in her stomach like a stone. Our home. You gambled away our home. A figure emerged from the shadows of the saloon porch, tall, broad-shouldered, with a worn Stetson pulled low over his eyes. Wade Daniels had been in Terlingua for only 6 months, but his reputation as a fair man with a steady hand had grown quickly. Unlike most cowboys passing through, he owned a modest ranch outside town, bought with money saved from years of cattle drives. Mrs. Hayes, Wade said quietly, his deep voice carrying despite the wind. I couldn't help overhearing. Thomas sneered, his bravado returning now that he had an audience. This ain't your business, Daniels. Maybe not, Wade replied evenly, his eyes never leaving Sarah's face. But I can't stand by and watch a lady lose her home because of cards. Sarah straightened her back, dignity being the only thing she had left. Mr. Daniels, I appreciate your concern, but my husband is right. This is a private matter. Wade removed his hat, revealing dark hair threaded with early silver despite him being only 32. The thing is, Mrs. Hayes, I was at that table, and I'm not convinced the game was fair. Thomas's face flushed. Are you calling me a liar? No, Wade replied. I'm suggesting Eddie McCrae might have cards up more than just his sleeve. Sarah's eyes widened. Eddie McCrae was one of the wealthiest men in the county and the most dangerous. Doesn't matter now, Thomas slurred. Deed signed. We're out by noon tomorrow. Sarah felt her world tilt. Tomorrow, Thomas, where will we go? Before Thomas could respond with another empty promise, Wade spoke up. I have a proposition. The old Miller place on my property, it's standing empty. It's small but solid. You're welcome to it while you sort things out. Thomas snorted. And what do you want in return, Cowboy, my wife? The slap echoed in the night air before Sarah even realized she'd struck her husband. 5 years of humiliation crystallized in that single moment. Thomas Hayes, you've lost our home. You will not sell my dignity as well. Wade's face remained impassive, though a muscle twitched in his jaw. I'm asking for nothing, Mr. Hayes. It's simply the right thing to do. Thomas spat on the ground. We don't need your charity. It's not charity I'm offering, Wade said quietly. It's decency, something in short supply these days. Sarah looked at Wade, really looked at him for the first time. His eyes were a clear gray blue, like the sky after rain, and there was something in them she hadn't seen in a long time. Respect. Thank you, Mr. Daniels, she said, ignoring Thomas's glare. We accept your kind offer. Sarah. Thomas growled. Unless you have another home hidden somewhere, Thomas, we have no choice. Sarah's voice was firm, a newfound steel in her tone that surprised even her. Wade nodded, replacing his hat. I'll send a wagon for your belongings in the morning. The place is yours for as long as you need it." As Wade walked away, Sarah felt something flutter in her chest, not hope exactly, but perhaps the possibility of it. She glanced at her husband, now slumped against the saloon wall, already calculating how to scrape together enough for tomorrow's game. The bitter wind gusted again, but somehow it didn't feel quite as cold. Dawn broke reluctantly over the Chisos Mountains, painting the desert landscape in shades of amber and rose. Sarah had been awake for hours, packing their meager belongings into 2 trunks and a few cloth sacks. Thomas had not returned after storming off the previous night, and a part of Sarah, a part that grew stronger with each passing hour, hoped he wouldn't. A knock at the door startled her. She opened it to find Wade Daniels, hat in hand, standing beside a wagon. "Mrs. Hayes," he greeted her with a slight bow. "I thought I'd come myself rather than send one of my hands." "Mr. Daniels," she acknowledged, aware of her rumpled appearance and the dark circles under her eyes. "Please call me Sarah." A small smile touched his lips. "Wade, then." "Thomas isn't here," she said, stepping back to let him enter their soon-to-be former home. It wasn't much, a 2-room adobe structure with a leaky roof and drafty windows, but it had been theirs. "I suspected as much." Wade's gaze took in the pack trunks. "Is this everything?" Sarah nodded, a lump forming in her throat. 5 years of marriage fits into 2 trunks and some sacks. Pathetic, isn't it? Wade shook his head. Not pathetic. Life sometimes takes unexpected turns. Like having your husband gamble away your home. The bitterness in her voice surprised her. Like finding a new one when you least expect it, Wade countered gently. Sarah looked up at him, searching for hidden meanings or expectations in his eyes, but found only sincerity. "Why are you doing this, Mr. Daniels?" "Wade, you don't know me. You owe me nothing." Wade considered her question, his weathered hands turning his hat brim slowly. "My ma raised me to believe that a person's measure is taken by what they do when no one's watching, and what they give when they have little to spare." "And what do you get in return?" Sarah asked, unable to believe his generosity came without cost. "Peace of mind," he replied simply. "Now, let me help with these trunks." Together they loaded the wagon, Sarah taking one last look at the place she'd called home. Her garden of hardy desert plants that had somehow thrived despite neglect. The mesquite tree where she'd hung laundry in summer. The cracked adobe walls that had at least kept out the worst of the elements. "Ready?" Wade asked softly. Sarah nodded, tucking a strand of chestnut hair behind her ear. "As I'll ever be." The journey to Wade's ranch took nearly 2 hours, the wagon following a winding path out of town and into the rugged landscape beyond. Sarah found herself studying her benefactor as he handled the reins with easy confidence. "Have you lived in Terlingua long?" she asked, breaking the comfortable silence. 6 months this side of town. Before that, I was north of here, near Fort Stockton, working other men's cattle, saved enough to buy my own spread eventually." "You did well for yourself." Wade glanced at her, a hint of humor in his eyes. "Don't sound so surprised. Not all cowboys die broke and drunk." Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I didn't mean, I know what you meant," he assured her, "and you're right to be cautious. You don't know me from Adam." "I know enough," Sarah said quietly. "You could have had my husband arrested for his debt. Instead, you're giving us shelter." "Speaking of your husband," Wade said carefully, "will he be joining you at the Miller place?" Sarah's hands twisted in her lap. "I don't know. Thomas has difficulties. With drink, with cards. He disappears sometimes." Wade nodded, asking no more questions, for which Sarah was grateful. As they crested a small rise, Wade's ranch came into view. It wasn't grand by any means, but the main house was solid, the corrals well maintained, and several outbuildings stood in neat arrangement. In the distance, a smaller house sat near a stand of cottonwoods. That's the Miller place, Wade said, pointing. Old Jeremiah Miller built it for his son, but the boy took off for California during the gold rush. Never came back. As they drew closer, Sarah saw it was a simple structure, one main room with what looked like a lean-to addition, a small porch and a stone chimney. But it had glass windows, not oil paper, and the roof appeared sound. "It's not much," Wade said apologetically as he stopped the wagon. "It's perfect," Sarah whispered, meaning it. Compared to what she'd left behind, this little house seemed like a palace. Wade helped her down from the wagon, his hands strong and steady at her waist. For a brief moment their eyes met, and Sarah felt that same flutter in her chest from the night before. She quickly looked away. "I'll help you get settled," Wade offered, already reaching for the first trunk. "You've done more than enough," Sarah protested. "I can manage." "I've no doubt you can," Wade said with that small smile that seemed to reach his eyes. "But my ma would haunt me if I left a lady to unpack alone." For the first time in years, Sarah found herself smiling, really smiling. "Well, we can't have that." The inside of the house was clean, if sparse a cast iron stove, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, a narrow bed with a straw mattress, and a few shelves. Wade had clearly had someone prepare for her arrival. Fresh kindling was laid in the stove, and a basket on the table held bread, cheese, and preserves. "My housekeeper, Zoe, sent the food," Wade explained, seeing Sarah's questioning look. "She's from town. Comes 3 times a week to keep me from living like a complete savage." Sarah ran her hand over the rough table. "Please thank her for me. This is more than I expected." "Zoe has a soft spot for new beginnings," Wade said, setting down her trunk. "Her husband died in the war. She had to start over too." Sarah nodded, understanding blooming between them the knowledge of life's fragility and the cost of starting anew. "I'll leave you to settle in," Wade said, moving toward the door. "I'm about a quarter-mile that way." He pointed toward the main house. "If you need anything, don't hesitate. One of my hands, Miguel, lives in the bunkhouse with the others. He'll help with firewood and such." "Thank you," Sarah said, the words feeling wholly inadequate. "I don't know when I'll be able to repay you." "There's nothing to repay," Wade insisted. The house was sitting empty. Now it's not. With a tip of his hat, he was gone, leaving Sarah alone in her new home. She sat heavily on one of the chairs, the events of the past 24 hours catching up with her. Yesterday, she'd had a husband and a home, flawed as both were. Today, she had neither, only the kindness of a stranger with eyes like the sky after rain. Sarah wiped away a single tear and stood. There would be time for tears later. Now, there was unpacking to do and a new life to build. 3 days passed with no sign of Thomas. Sarah settled into a routine in the small house, cleaning every corner, arranging and rearranging her few possessions until the place began to feel like hers. On the morning of the 4th day, she ventured to Wade's main house, determined to find some way to contribute. The main house was larger than she'd initially thought, a sprawling single-story structure of adobe and timber with a wide porch wrapping around 3 sides. Sarah hesitated at the front step, suddenly conscious of her faded calico dress and the worn shawl around her shoulders. Before she could knock, the door opened to reveal a plump, gray-haired woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense expression. "You must be Mrs. Hayes," the woman said, wiping her hands on her apron. "About time you came up to the house. I'm Zoe Pierce, Mr. Daniels's housekeeper." "Please call me Sarah," she replied, taken aback by the warm welcome. "I wanted to thank you for the food basket and to ask if there might be some way I could earn my keep around here." Zoe's eyebrows rose. "Earn your keep? Child, Mr. Daniels hasn't said a word about you working." "I know, but I can't accept charity indefinitely," Sarah explained. "I can cook, clean, mend, whatever's needed." Zoe studied her for a long moment, then nodded with approval. Well, I won't turn down an extra pair of hands. Come in, come in. Mr. Daniels is out with the cattle, but he'll be back for dinner. Sarah followed Zoe into a surprisingly comfortable home. Unlike the Spartan Miller place, Wade's house was furnished with solid, well-made pieces, a large dining table that could seat 8, a leather sofa and chairs arranged near a stone fireplace, bookshelves filled with volumes that suggested their owner was well-read. He may live like a bachelor, but he wasn't raised by wolves, Zoe commented, noting Sarah's surprise. His mother was from Boston, had definite ideas about civilized living. Sarah helped Zoe prepare a stew for the evening meal, the two women falling into an easy rapport as they worked. By the time Wade returned, stomping dust from his boots on the porch, Sarah had set the table and was removing fresh bread from the oven. "Something smells wonderful," Wade said as he entered, stopping short when he saw Sarah. "Mrs. Hayes, I didn't expect to see you here." "She came offering to work," Zoe explained before Sarah could speak. "Got a head on her shoulders, this one, unlike some I could mention." The last part was muttered under her breath, but Sarah caught it nonetheless. "That's not necessary," Wade said, his expression concerned. "The Miller place is yours without obligation." "It may not be necessary for you, Mr. Daniels," Sarah replied with gentle firmness, "but it is for me. I've never been comfortable taking without giving in return." Something like admiration flickered in Wade's eyes. "In that case, I won't insult you by refusing, but please, it's still Wade." "Wade," Sarah acknowledged with a small smile. "Now wash up. The stew will get cold." Zoe made a sound that might have been a chuckle as she bustled out, muttering about getting home before dark. Dinner was a surprisingly comfortable affair. Wade spoke of his day cattle that had strayed, a fence in need of mending, plans for the spring roundup. Sarah found herself genuinely interested, asking questions that revealed her own knowledge of ranch life. "You seem to know a fair bit about cattle," Wade observed as they finished their meal. "My father had a small spread near El Paso," Sarah explained. "Nothing like this, but enough that I learned the basics." "What happened to it?" Sarah's face clouded. "The war, debt, the usual story." "He died when I was 19, and there was nothing left but memories and unpaid loans." "And then you met Thomas," Wade said, his tone carefully neutral. Sarah nodded, her fingers tracing the wood grain of the table. "He was charming, confident, promised me the world." She laughed without humor. "I should have known better. Father always said a man who promises the world usually can't deliver his own backyard." "Your father sounds like a wise man." "He was," Sarah agreed softly. "He would have liked you." Their eyes met across the table, and that now familiar flutter returned to Sarah's chest. She stood abruptly, gathering the dishes. "I should clean up and get back before dark." "I'll walk you," Wade offered, standing as well. "That's not necessary, I know," Wade finished for her with a slight smile. "Seems we keep having that conversation." The walk back to the Miller place was quiet, the setting sun painting the desert in deep oranges and purples. Stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky by the time they reached the small house. "Thank you for dinner," Wade said as they stopped at her door. "Best meal I've had in months." "Thank you for the company," Sarah replied honestly. "It's been a while since I've had a conversation that didn't end in an argument or a plea for money." Wade's expression turned serious. "Sarah, if Thomas hasn't returned by now—" "You think he's not coming back," she finished for him. "I think you should prepare yourself for that possibility." Sarah nodded slowly. "I've been married to Thomas for 5 years, Wade. This wouldn't be the first time he's disappeared, but it might be the best thing for both of us if this time he stayed gone." The admission hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Wade took a step back, respecting the invisible boundary between them. "Good night, Sarah," he said softly. "Good night, Wade." As she closed the door behind her, Sarah leaned against it, her heart pounding for reasons that had nothing to do with fear or grief. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a different kind of future, one without Thomas's broken promises, one where she might find not just safety, but happiness. The thought should have frightened her. Instead, as she prepared for bed in the quiet house, it felt like the first breath after nearly drowning. Spring came early to Terlingua that year, painting the desert with wildflowers and turning the air soft with promise. March brought gentle rains that transformed the landscape from browns and grays to a palette of greens and golds. Sarah had settled into a routine, working at Wade's house 3 days a week, helping Zoe with cleaning and cooking, and spending the rest of her time making the Miller place truly her own. She'd planted a small garden, coaxing vegetables from the desert soil with patient determination. Wade had provided seeds and tools without being asked, appearing at her door one morning with a wheelbarrow full of supplies. "Thought you might want to try your hand at gardening," he'd said, his expression that careful mix of kindness and distance he always maintained around her. "The soil's good near the cottonwoods if you can keep the rabbits out." Thomas had been gone for nearly 2 months now, and with each passing day, Sarah felt less like a woman abandoned and more like one released. She'd heard whispers in town when she accompanied Zoe to buy supplies that Thomas Hayes had been seen in El Paso, already deep in debt to new creditors. Some tongues wagged about the young widow living on Wade Daniels's property. But Zoe's fierce loyalty and Wade's respected position in the community kept the worst of the gossip at bay. On a particularly fine April morning, Sarah was hanging laundry behind the Miller place when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Shading her eyes, she watched as Wade rode up on his chestnut gelding, leading a gentle-looking bay mare. "Good morning," he called, dismounting with the easy grace of a man who'd spent most of his life in the saddle. "Good morning," Sarah returned, pushing a strand of hair from her face. "What brings you by so early?" "Thought you might like to see more of the property than just the path between houses," Wade said, patting the bay's neck. "This is Daisy, gentlest horse I own." Sarah approached the mare, stroking her velvety nose. "She's beautiful." "She's yours if you want her," Wade said, watching Sarah's expression carefully. "Every ranch hand needs a horse." Sarah's hand stilled on Daisy's nose. "Wade, I can't accept. It's not a gift," he interrupted gently. "It's a tool for the job. Can't expect you to walk everywhere, and Daisy's been eating my feed without earning her keep for too long." Sarah looked from the horse to the man, understanding the delicate balance he was trying to maintain, giving her independence while preserving her pride. "In that case," she said, a smile spreading across her face, "I suppose I'd better earn my feed too." "That's settled then," Wade said, returning her smile with one of his own, a rare, full smile that transformed his usual reserved expression. "Get your hat. I'll show you the south pasture." The day that followed was one Sarah would remember later as the moment everything changed. They rode side by side through meadows of bluebonnets and across rocky plateaus that offered views all the way to Mexico. Wade pointed out landmarks, told stories of the land's history, shared his plans for expanding the herd. They stopped for lunch near a small spring, sheltered by cottonwoods that rustled in the gentle breeze. Sitting on a blanket Wade had packed, sharing cold chicken and biscuits, Sarah felt something she hadn't in years: contentment. "You're good with that horse," Wade observed as Daisy grazed nearby. "Your father taught you to ride," Sarah nodded, accepting the canteen he passed her. "He taught me everything he thought a person should know, regardless of whether it was considered ladylike. Mama died when I was young, so it was just the two of us for a long time." "He did well by you," Wade said quietly. "What about your family?" Sarah asked, realizing she knew little about Wade's past despite living on his property for months. Pa was a rancher in Colorado. Ma came west as a schoolteacher, met Pa, and never went back east. I have a brother in Denver, lawyer, married with 3 children. Sister married a banker in Santa Fe. "And you chose Terlingua," Sarah said, looking around at the wild, beautiful landscape. "I chose freedom," Wade corrected gently. "My brother and sister, they're happy with their lives, but I always needed space, needed to build something of my own." "I understand that," Sarah said softly. "After my father died, marrying Thomas seemed like the only option. I was young, with no family, few prospects, but I think part of me always knew it was wrong. I just didn't see another path." Wade was silent for a moment, his gaze on the distant mountains. "And now?" Sarah considered the question, feeling the weight of it. "Now I'm beginning to believe there are always other paths if you're brave enough to look for them." Their eyes met, and Sarah felt that flutter in her chest again, stronger now, impossible to ignore. Wade's expression softened, and for a moment she thought he might reach for her hand. Instead, he stood, offering her a hand up. "We should head back. Looks like weather coming in." Sure enough, clouds were gathering on the horizon, dark and promising rain. They packed quickly, mounting their horses just as the first fat droplets began to fall. The storm caught them halfway home, the spring rain turning suddenly fierce. By the time they reached the Miller place, they were both soaked to the skin, laughing as they dismounted and ran for the porch. "So much for a pleasant ride," Wade said, removing his hat to shake off the excess water. "It was pleasant," Sarah insisted, wringing water from her skirt. "Until the deluge." Wade looked at her, hair plastered to her face, dress clinging to her curves, eyes bright with laughter, and something in his expression changed, grew warmer, more intense. "You should get inside, get dry," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "You too," Sarah replied, suddenly aware of how close they were standing, sheltered from the rain by the small porch roof. "You could. Come in. Wait out the worst of it." The invitation hung between them, innocent on the surface but charged with unspoken possibility. Wade swallowed visibly. "Better not," he said softly. "People talk, Sarah. Your reputation, my reputation." Sarah let out a small, bitter laugh. "I'm the wife of a gambling drunk who abandoned me. I think my reputation was lost the moment Thomas walked out." "Not to me," Wade said firmly. "Never to me." The sincerity in his eyes made Sarah's breath catch. Here was a man who still saw worth in her, when the rest of the world might not, a man who offered shelter and asked for nothing, who gave her a horse and called it a tool for her job, who looked at her now with such careful restraint that she could see the cost of it in the tension of his jaw. "Wade," she whispered, not sure what she was asking for. He took a step back, putting distance between them. "I'll see to the horses," he said, his voice steadier now. "You get dry before you catch your death." As he turned to go, Sarah caught his arm. "Thank you for today," she said simply. "It was the best day I've had in a very long time." Wade's expression softened. "For me too," he admitted quietly, before stepping back into the rain. Sarah watched him lead the horses toward the barn, rain soaking his broad shoulders, and felt something inside her shift and settle. She wasn't ready, not yet. Not while Thomas's shadow still lingered, but for the first time, she allowed herself to acknowledge what had been growing between them since that night outside the saloon. Hope. Not just for shelter or safety, but for something she'd nearly stopped believing in, the possibility of real love. May brought relentless sun, and the gradual certainty that Thomas Hayes would not return. Sarah heard through Zoe that he had been seen in Santa Fe, already entangled with another woman and deeper in gambling debts than ever. The news should have hurt more than it did, but Sarah found herself feeling only a distant relief and guilt for that relief. "You could divorce him," Zoe suggested one afternoon as they shelled peas on Wade's porch. "It's not unheard of, especially in a case of abandonment." "It's complicated," Sarah replied, though the idea had already taken root in her mind. "Divorce means admitting failure." Zoe snorted. "Seems to me the failure was his, not yours." "Maybe," Sarah conceded, "but there's also, well, people would talk even more than they already do." Zoe's shrewd gaze settled on Sarah. "You mean you're worried what Wade would think?" Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I didn't say that." "Didn't have to," Zoe replied with the confidence of a woman who had seen too much of life to mince words. "Anyone with eyes can see what's growing between you two, except maybe yourselves." "It's not proper," Sarah protested weakly. "I'm still a married woman." "Married to a man who gambled away your home and left you with nothing," Zoe reminded her bluntly. "Way I see it, Thomas Hayes forfeited any claim to propriety the moment he signed over your house in a card game." Before Sarah could respond, the sound of approaching riders drew their attention. Wade appeared around the bend in the drive, accompanied by two of his hands and a string of newly purchased cattle. As always, Sarah's heart quickened at the sight of him. Over the past months, their friendship had deepened. But Wade maintained that careful distance, never overstepping the invisible boundary between them, despite the growing tension that sometimes made the air seem to crackle when they were alone. Wade dismounted, handing the reins to Miguel before climbing the porch steps. His face was dusty from the trail, his eyes tired but brightening when they landed on Sarah. "Ladies," he greeted them, removing his hat. "Looks like a pleasant way to pass the afternoon." "More pleasant than herding stubborn cattle, I'd wager," Zoe replied with a smile. "You look done in." 20 miles of bad trail will do that," Wade agreed, settling into a chair with a grateful sigh. "But we got a good price on those heifers." Sarah wordlessly handed him a glass of water, their fingers brushing in the exchange. The brief contact sent a familiar warmth through her, and from the way Wade's gaze lingered on her face, she knew he felt it too. Zoe looked between them with knowing eyes. "Well, I should get dinner started. Those boys will be hungry." She gathered her basket and headed inside, leaving Sarah and Wade alone on the porch. For a moment neither spoke, content in the comfortable silence that had become their habit. "I heard news in town," Wade said finally, his tone careful. "About Thomas." Sarah's hand stilled on the peas. "What news?" "He's in Santa Fe. Seems he's taken up with a widow who owns a boarding house there." Sarah absorbed this information, searching for the pain she should feel and finding only a hollow sort of vindication. "I see." "I thought you should know," Wade continued, watching her closely. "In case you were still waiting." "I stopped waiting for Thomas a long time ago," Sarah admitted quietly. "Even before he gambled away our home, I just didn't know how to admit it to myself." Wade nodded, his expression unreadable. "And now I'm trying to figure out what comes next," Sarah said honestly. "Zoe thinks I should file for divorce on grounds of abandonment." Wade was silent for a long moment, turning his hat in his hands. "Would you divorce him?" The question hung between them, weighted with unspoken implications. Sarah looked at the man before her, this good, honorable man who had given her shelter when she needed it most, who had asked for nothing in return, but had somehow given her back her sense of worth. "Yes," she said finally, her voice stronger than she expected. "I believe I would. A marriage should be more than a name on paper. It should be partnership, respect." She hesitated, then added softly, "love." Wade's eyes met hers, and something in them made her breath catch. "Those things are rare," he said quietly, "worth fighting for when you find them." "Yes," Sarah agreed, her heart pounding. "They are." The moment stretched between them, taut with possibility. Then the sound of Zoe calling from inside broke the spell, and Wade stood, settling his hat back on his head. "I should clean up before dinner," he said, his voice rougher than usual. Sarah nodded, unable to trust her own voice as she watched him go. Something had shifted between them in that moment, a truth acknowledged, if not yet spoken aloud. That night, alone in the Miller house, Sarah made her decision. In the morning, she would ride into Terlingua and speak with the county clerk about filing for divorce. It was time to close one chapter of her life before another could truly begin. The following morning dawned bright and clear, with the promise of summer heat already in the air. Sarah dressed carefully in her best dress, a navy blue calico that was faded but still presentable, and braided her hair neatly. As she was saddling Daisy, she heard the now familiar sound of hoofbeats approaching. Wade rode up, his expression serious. "You're heading into town." Sarah nodded, tightening Daisy's cinch. "I need to speak with the county clerk." Understanding dawned in Wade's eyes. "About the divorce?" "Yes." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "It's time to make a clean break." Wade dismounted, coming to stand beside her. "I'll ride with you if you'd like the company." The offer touched her deeply. "I would, thank you." They rode side by side, the rhythm of the horses' hooves a comforting soundtrack to the journey. Neither spoke much, but the silence was companionable rather than strained. As they approached the outskirts of Terlingua, Wade cleared his throat. "Sarah, there's something I should tell you before we reach town." Something in his tone made her pull Daisy to a halt. "What is it?" Wade stopped beside her, his expression troubled. "I received a telegram yesterday." "From the sheriff in Santa Fe." Sarah felt a chill despite the morning warmth. "About Thomas?" Wade nodded grimly. "There was a fight at a gambling house. Thomas drew on the wrong man." The world seemed to slow around Sarah as she processed his meaning. "He's dead." The words felt strange in her mouth, disconnected from reality. "Yes," Wade confirmed gently. "I'm sorry, Sarah." Sarah sat motionless, a storm of conflicting emotions washing through her. Grief, not for the man Thomas had become, but for the one she had once believed him to be. Relief, followed immediately by guilt for feeling relieved, and beneath it all, a strange, hollow emptiness where she had expected to feel something more profound. "I don't know what to feel," she admitted finally, her voice small. "You don't have to know right now," Wade assured her. "Whatever you feel is your right." His simple acceptance of her confusion was like a balm. Sarah took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I still need to go to the clerk's office. There will be arrangements to make, papers to file as a widow rather than a divorcee." Wade studied her face. "Are you sure? It can wait a day or two." "No," Sarah said firmly. "I've waited long enough to start my life over. Thomas made his choices. Now I need to make mine." Wade's expression softened with something like admiration. "You're quite a woman, Sarah Hayes." The ride into town was subdued after that, but Sarah felt a strange clarity descending over her. Thomas's death was not the ending she had imagined, but perhaps it was the clean break. She needed a severing of the past that would allow her to move forward without the lingering complications of divorce. The county clerk, a thin man with wire-rimmed spectacles, was sympathetic when Sarah explained her situation. He provided the necessary paperwork for her to claim her widow's status and informed her that, as Thomas had no known relatives, any outstanding debts would die with him. "It's a blessing in disguise in a way," the clerk said, not unkindly. "Divorce proceedings can be messy, expensive affairs." Sarah nodded, signing where indicated. "Yes, I suppose it is." As they left the clerk's office, Wade placed a gentle hand at the small of her back, a gesture so natural that neither of them seemed to register its significance, until Sarah felt the warmth of his palm through her dress. "What now?" Wade asked quietly as they stood in the dusty street. Sarah looked up at him, seeing not just the strong, silent rancher who had offered her shelter, but the man beneath the one who respected her enough to ask what she wanted rather than tell her what to do. "Now I go home," she said simply, "and I begin again." The word home hung between them, its meaning transformed. Not the house Thomas had gambled away, not even the Miller place that had been her refuge, but something less tangible and more profound, a sense of belonging that had nothing to do with walls and everything to do with the man standing beside her. Wade nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Then let's go home, Sarah." They rode back to the ranch in silence, each lost in private thoughts as the landscape rolled by. The news of Thomas's death had changed something between them, removed an obstacle, but created a different kind of restraint. Wade, honorable to his core, would give her time to mourn, even if Sarah herself wasn't sure what she was mourning. As they approached the ranch, the setting sun gilded the land in gold and amber, casting long shadows across the desert floor. The Miller place came into view, its modest silhouette now familiar and welcoming. Wade helped Sarah dismount, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "Will you be all right tonight? I could ask Zoe to stay with you." Sarah shook her head, touched by his concern. "I'll be fine. I need some time alone to process everything." Wade nodded, understanding in his eyes. "If you need anything at all, I know where to find you," Sarah finished with a small smile. For a moment they stood close, the air between them charged with words unsaid. Then Wade stepped back, his expression softening. "Good night, Sarah." "Good night, Wade." As she watched him ride toward the main house, Sarah felt a strange peace settling over her. Thomas was gone, taking with him the last ties to a life that had brought her more sorrow than joy. Tomorrow would bring a new day, new choices, new possibilities. For the first time in years, Sarah felt truly free. The days following the news of Thomas's death passed in a haze of conflicting emotions for Sarah. She found herself going through the motions of daily life, cooking, cleaning, tending her garden, while her mind tried to reconcile the finality of Thomas's passing with the future now opening before her. Wade kept a respectful distance, understanding her need for space without being told. He still checked on her daily, often bringing small gifts, fresh eggs from his chickens, a book he thought she might enjoy, wildflowers he'd picked along the way. Each gesture spoke of a care that went beyond mere charity or obligation. A week after receiving the news, Sarah woke before dawn, a decision crystallizing in her mind. She dressed quickly and walked the familiar path to Wade's house, arriving just as the first light of day was breaking over the eastern horizon. Wade was already up, sitting on his porch with a cup of coffee as if he'd been expecting her. He stood when he saw her approach, his expression questioning but welcoming. "Sarah, is everything all right?" "Yes," she replied, climbing the steps to stand before him. "Better than all right, actually. I've been doing a lot of thinking this past week." Wade gestured to the chair beside his. "Would you like some coffee?" Sarah shook her head, too restless to sit. "Wade, I need to say something, and I'd appreciate it if you'd let me finish before you respond." His eyebrows rose slightly, but he nodded, setting his cup aside. Sarah took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "When Thomas gambled away our home, I thought my life was over. I couldn't imagine a path forward, and then you appeared, offering shelter and expecting nothing in return. At first, I couldn't understand why a stranger would show such kindness without ulterior motives." Wade started to speak, but Sarah held up a hand, asking for his patience. These past few months living here, working alongside you and Zoe, I've begun to understand who you are: a man of honor, of integrity. A man who does right because it is right, not for reward or recognition. She moved closer, her eyes never leaving his. I've also come to understand something about myself. I married Thomas because I thought I needed someone to take care of me, to give me a place in the world. I was wrong. What I need is to stand on my own feet, to know my own worth. Wade's expression softened, pride and something deeper shining in his eyes. The thing is, Sarah continued, her voice growing stronger, standing on my own doesn't mean standing alone. I've mourned Thomas this week, not the man he became, but the young man I once believed in. I've made peace with that part of my life, and now I'm ready to look forward. She took another step toward him, close enough now that she could see the flecks of gold in his blue eyes, the way the morning light caught in his dark hair. I don't want your charity anymore, Wade. I don't want to be your good deed or your responsibility. What I hope we both want, is a partnership. Equal. Built on respect and love. The word hung in the air between them, at once terrifying and liberating. Wade's expression transformed, wonder replacing caution. Sarah, he said softly, are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying that I love you, Sarah replied simply, the truth of it washing through her like a cleansing tide. Not because you rescued me, but because of who you are, and if you feel the same. She didn't get to finish. Wade closed the distance between them, his hands coming up to cradle her face with exquisite gentleness. I have loved you, he whispered, since the moment you stood in the street outside that saloon and refused to let Thomas sell your dignity along with your home. Sarah's heart soared at his words, at the tenderness in his touch. Then, why did you wait so long to tell me? Because you deserve time, Wade answered honestly. Time to heal, to find yourself again. And because I needed to be sure that what you felt for me wasn't gratitude or obligation. It's neither, Sarah assured him, her hands coming to rest on his chest, feeling the strong, steady beat of his heart. It's simply love, real love, the kind built on knowing each other's true selves. Wade's smile then was like the dawn breaking, full of promise and light. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he lowered his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, a question rather than a demand. But when Sarah rose on her tiptoes to press closer, it deepened, becoming a promise exchanged without words. When they finally parted, breathless and smiling, Wade kept his arms around her waist, as if afraid she might disappear if he let go. I never dared hope, he admitted, that you might come to feel for me what I feel for you. Even after Thomas was gone, I thought perhaps you would want to start fresh somewhere else, somewhere without reminders. This place doesn't remind me of Thomas, Sarah said, glancing around at the ranch bathed in morning light. It reminds me of new beginnings, of home, of you. Wade's eyes darkened with emotion. Sarah Hayes, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife, not out of necessity or convenience, but because we choose each other, freely and completely? Sarah's smile was radiant as joy bubbled up within her. Yes, Wade Daniels, 1,000 times yes. He kissed her again, more firmly this time, sealing their promise as the sun rose fully over the horizon, casting golden light across the land that would now truly be their home. The wedding took place on a perfect June morning, with the desert in bloom and the sky an endless blue canopy overhead. Zoe had insisted on hosting the ceremony at the main house, enlisting the help of the ranch hands to transform the yard into a celebration space worthy of the occasion. Sarah wore a simple white dress ordered from a catalog in El Paso, with wildflowers in her hair instead of a veil. Wade stood tall and proud in a new black suit, His usually weathered face softened with joy as he watched Sarah walk toward him on Miguel's arm. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, with the circuit preacher speaking of partnership, respect, and love, the very foundations Sarah and Wade had already established between them. When they exchanged rings, simple gold bands Wade had ridden all the way to Fort Stockton to purchase, their hands were steady, their voices clear with certainty. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the preacher declared to the small gathering of friends and neighbors. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." The celebration that followed was joyful but modest, reflecting both Sarah and Wade's natures. Tables laden with food, music from Miguel's fiddle and another hand's harmonica, dancing that lasted well into the evening. Through it all, Wade kept Sarah close, his hand finding hers as naturally as breathing, his eyes returning to her face with wonder and devotion. As the sun began to set, turning the desert to flame and shadow, Wade led Sarah away from the festivities, toward a waiting wagon. "Where are we going?" Sarah asked, curious rather than concerned. Wade smiled, that rare, full smile that still made her heart skip. "I have a surprise for you." They rode a short distance, following a path Sarah hadn't taken before until they crested a small rise. There, nestled in a protected hollow with a view of the mountains, stood a house not large, but solid and well-crafted, with a wide porch and windows that caught the last light of day. "Wade," Sarah breathed, understanding dawning. "Did you build this?" "The men and I have been working on it for weeks," Wade confirmed, helping her down from the wagon. "I wanted us to have a fresh start, not my house, not the Miller place, but our home." Tears filled Sarah's eyes as she took in the simple beauty of the structure. "It's perfect," she whispered. "There's more," Wade said, leading her to the door. "I had some help with the furnishings." Inside, Sarah found a home already prepared for living, a comfortable parlor with bookshelves and a stone fireplace, a dining room with a table large enough for guests, a kitchen with the latest stove Wade could find. And beyond, a bedroom with a large four-poster bed covered in a wedding quilt Sarah recognized as Zoe's handiwork. "How did you manage all this?" Sarah asked, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. "With a lot of help," Wade admitted. "Zoe coordinated most of it. She's quite the general when she sets her mind to something." Sarah laughed, wiping away happy tears. "I'll have to thank her properly tomorrow." "Tomorrow," Wade agreed, taking her hands in his. "Tonight is just for us." He drew her close, his arms encircling her waist as he had that first time on his porch. "Are you happy, Mrs. Daniels?" "Happier than I ever thought possible," Sarah answered truthfully, reaching up to touch his face. "You've given me so much, Wade, not just a home, but a future, a partnership." "You've given me just as much," Wade replied, his voice rough with emotion. "Before you, this ranch was just land and cattle. Now it's a home. You've made it a home." As the last light faded from the sky and stars began to appear, Wade and Sarah stood in their new house, wrapped in each other's arms, the journey that had brought them together complete and a new one just beginning. "I love you, Sarah Daniels," Wade whispered against her hair. "And I love you," Sarah replied, her heart full to bursting. "Today, tomorrow, and all the days to come." 5 years later, Sarah sat on the porch of their home, watching as Wade taught their 4-year-old son, James, to ride his first pony. The little boy's laughter carried across the yard, a sound that never failed to fill Sarah's heart with joy. "Not too fast, James," she called, one hand resting protectively on her swollen belly. Their second child was due in less than a month, and Wade had been hovering anxiously, insisting she rest more than she felt necessary. "He's fine," Wade assured her, though his hands never left the pony's bridle. "Steady as his mother." Sarah smiled at the comparison. In the years since their marriage, the Daniels Ranch had prospered, expanding to twice its original size. Sarah had proved herself as capable with the business side of ranching as Wade was with the practical aspects, keeping the books with precision and negotiating contracts with a shrewdness that had earned her respect throughout the county. The Miller place still stood, now renovated and expanded to serve as a home for Zoe, who had become more family than employee. At 70, she had finally agreed to retire from daily housekeeping duties, though she still insisted on Sunday dinners and spoiling young James at every opportunity. "Mama, look," James called, sitting tall in the small saddle Wade had commissioned specially for him. "I'm riding like Papa." "I see you, sweetheart," Sarah called back, her heart swelling with pride. James had Wade's eyes and her stubborn chin, a combination that promised both strength and sensitivity as he grew. As she watched her family, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her here from the desperate woman standing outside a saloon on a cold February night to the confident, loved woman she was now. The path had not been straight or easy, but every turn had led her here, to this moment, to this happiness. Wade looked up, catching her gaze across the yard, and the love in his eyes was as clear and strong as it had been on their wedding day. Without words, he communicated everything she needed to know, that he saw her, cherished her, respected her as his equal partner in all things. Later that evening, with James tucked into bed and the ranch quiet around them, Wade and Sarah sat together on their porch, watching the stars emerge in the vast Texas sky. Wade's arm was around her shoulders, his free hand resting gently on her belly where their second child grew. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly, noticing her contemplative expression. Sarah leaned into his embrace, drawing comfort from his steady presence. "I was thinking about how life takes unexpected turns, how sometimes what seems like an ending is really a beginning." Wade nodded, understanding without explanation. "Like a gambling debt that leads to the luckiest hand of all." Sarah smiled at his metaphor. "Exactly like that. When Thomas lost our home, I thought my world was ending. I couldn't see past that moment, that loss. And now," Wade prompted gently, "now I understand that sometimes you have to lose everything to find what truly matters," Sarah replied, turning to meet his gaze. "That night, you offered shelter and asked for nothing in return, but you gave me something far more valuable than a roof over my head, Wade Daniels." "What's that?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "The chance to discover my own strength," Sarah answered, "and the freedom to choose love rather than necessity." Wade's arms tightened around her, his lips finding her temple in a tender kiss. "I'd say we both won that hand, Mrs. Daniels." As they sat together in the deepening twilight, the baby kicked beneath their joined hands, a reminder of the future they continued to build together. Around them, the ranch settled into evening rhythms, cattle lowing in distant pastures, horses nickering softly in their stalls, the windmill creaking as it turned in the gentle breeze. This was home, not just the house Wade had built with his hands or the land they tended together, but the life they had created from unexpected beginnings. A life built on respect, partnership, and a love that had been offered freely, asking nothing in return but growing into something far richer than either of them could have imagined on that cold February night when their paths first crossed outside a Terlingua saloon. "I love you, Wade," Sarah whispered into the gathering darkness, "today and always." "And I love you," Wade replied, the truth of it evident in every word, every touch, every day they had shared, and all those yet to come. "My Sarah, my heart, my home." In the years that followed, the Daniels Ranch became known throughout West Texas, not just for its fine cattle and fair business practices, but for the family at its heart. Wade and Sarah welcomed a daughter that's Spring Lily, named for the wildflowers that bloomed across the desert, and 2 years later, another son they called Robert, after Sarah's father. Their home became a gathering place for neighboring ranchers, a safe haven for travelers, and eventually, as the children grew, a place where young cowboys learned the trade under Wade's patient guidance. Sarah established a small school on the property, teaching not only her own children but those of the ranch hands and nearby homesteaders, passing on her father's belief that knowledge belonged to everyone, regardless of gender or circumstance. Through drought years and prosperity, through the challenges of raising children and running a growing ranch, Wade and Sarah remained steadfast partners. Their love, born in an act of kindness with no expectation of return, deepened with each passing season, each shared burden, each joy multiplied by being shared. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the children were asleep and the work of the day was done, Sarah would find Wade on the porch, looking out at the land they had nurtured together. She would sit beside him, their hands finding each other as naturally as breathing, and remember how it all began with a home lost, a home offered, and a journey they could never have imagined on that fateful night in Terlingua. "Do you ever wonder," she asked him once, as they watched a meteor shower paint the desert sky with fleeting fire, "what would have happened if Thomas hadn't gambled away our home that night, if our paths had never crossed?" Wade considered the question, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "I believe some souls are meant to find each other," he said finally. "If not that night, then another. If not that way, then some other way." Sarah smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "A romantic cowboy." "Who would have thought? Only for you," Wade assured her with a chuckle. "Only ever for you." And as the stars wheeled overhead and the desert night wrapped around them like a familiar blanket, Sarah knew with bone-deep certainty that this was where she was always meant to be, not because fate or circumstance had decreed it, but because she and Wade had chosen it, had built it together with love, respect, and the courage to begin again when all seemed lost. In the heart of the Wild West, they had found not just shelter but home, not just partnership but love, not just a new beginning but a life richer and more fulfilling than either could have imagined on that cold February night when a desperate hand of cards changed everything and nothing at all.